We're a quarter of the way through the year and I've had an idea. For 2020 and 2021 I listed my favourite JRPGs that I played during those periods. However, any game that I finish is what I consider to be high quality, and by the nature of a top 10 many titles get left behind. So, instead of waiting till the end of the year, I thought why not take that same approach but do it every 3 months instead. That way I can give attention to the JRPGs that I feel deserve it. I want to make this very clear as well, that no game on this list is what I consider to be bad, otherwise I wouldn't have finished it. That means that in my eyes, even the ones at the bottom are worth any JRPG fan's time. Without further ado, here's my personal ranking of the JRPGs I've played thus far. At number 11 is Arafel. Now, Arafel itself came about from a Western developer in Stegosoft Games, but it's clearly inspired by the 16-bit era of JRPGs, and for that reason I'm fine with including it. There will be a couple more of those as we go through, but the spotlight for now is on this little gem. What you'll notice immediately about Arafel is its charming presentation. The pixel style is crisp and pays homage to the games of old. But it's not just on the surface where this game does well. You've got a solid turn-based combat system with 4 main characters, and those characters also have individual quests that feed into their progression, so despite not having much in the way of choice for your roster, each character has a clear role within the party that expands over time, meaning that there's always plenty of choice on offer. Talking about the characters, they themselves are pretty good with fairly decent dialogue, though I do think some of it encroaches on moments where the narrative is attempting to be more serious, which does act as a detriment at times. It also has to be mentioned that at its core, Arafel is an indie game, and as such it is limited by its budget. Despite the evident care that the developers put into the game, there are some frayed edges like the artwork and confusing map. And I personally did have a screen tearing issue throughout when the view shifted, which to the developers' credit they have attempted to fix. As of the time that I played it though, it was still there. Despite those issues, Arafel is a nice little journey overall, with excellent value for money. At number 10 is The World Ends With You Final Remix. As a person with no history in regards to this series, I was immediately captivated by how fresh The World Ends With You felt. The art style, updated from the original, was sharp and pleasing on the eyes, and you notice almost immediately the amazing soundtrack on top of that. In terms of gameplay, it's pretty good as far as ARPGs go. You control the protagonist Neku and guide him through Shibuya as he attempts to survive the Reaper's game, with each day presenting a new challenge for him and his partner. During those days, you'll be fighting the Noise, using psych pins as your method of attack. These pins each represent a different power that Neku can use, and they're activated in varying ways. Since this was originally designed for the DS, there's an emphasis on touchscreen controls to partake in this combat, and Final Remix for the Switch is no different. The issue though is that the best experience remains on the DS. A few corners had to be cut to port it to mobiles initially and then to the Switch. There are 2 ways you can control Neku. You can use a Joy-Con with the Switch docked, or you can hold the tablet in your hands and use your fingers or a stylus. I opted for the latter option, and I can't deny I never got used to this. I'm more in tune with a traditional controller, especially when some of the pins require very specific actions to use. And it is the controls that push The World Ends With You further down the list for me. I'm just not a fan of it. However, if you can get past that, you'll be rewarded with a compelling action RPG, reinforced with a strong narrative. At number 9 is another game you can finish within 2 weekends in Shadows of Adam. Once again, it's a title developed by a Western developer, but like Arafel, is inspired by the games of old. Shadows of Adam gets the ball rolling with a simple yet intriguing opening act, quickly evolving into a full-fledged adventure with a good cast of characters. Though again, the dialogue does sometimes overstretch to juvenile levels, it's mostly consistent, and I was fully on board with the developments in the narrative itself. Everything flowed quite well. What I have to give Shadows of Adam real praise for is that despite being a short game, it packs that time with meaningful content, like backgrounds on each character and how it shapes them into who they are in the present age. In terms of gameplay, it's a turn-based system reminiscent of Mystic Quest, but better.
So you have chosen death.
Each character to a max of 4 have a pool of ability points, and each ability will drain said gauge. It recovers over time during battle, but it's on the player to manage it well, especially during boss fights. The options between characters also feel intuitive. You can unleash some pretty cool combos by combining their abilities. For me though, the difficulty spikes are a bit out of sync. Some of the later enemies, especially in groups, felt more dangerous than the final boss of the game, and there's no doubt that when said enemies buff themselves, it can be a bit of a slog to get through. I also think that the puzzles the game offers aren't great, they're pretty much always the same, and I would have liked more diversity in the items you find during your world excursions. But once again, the positive outweighs the problems for Shadows of Adam. It's a nice callback to the olden days, but does enough by itself to ensure it doesn't need to lean on that legacy. Add on to that a great OST, nice presentation, and excellent value for money, and this game is definitely worth a try. At number 8 is Cosmic Star Heroine. The art style alone will immediately have you drawing that Chrono Trigger comparison, and that extends to gameplay too in some respects. There are no random encounters in this game, you see the enemies and take them on when you feel like it. Combat itself, though, is easily the best part about the game in my eyes. Each character comes equipped with a multitude of abilities that are either derived from their own individual progression or the equipment they wear. Battle pacing gradually increases as the fight continues, with each combatant, including the enemies, gaining style which increases damage, and the hyper mode mechanic allows you to plan in advance for heavy hitting attacks. In terms of the narrative, you've got a journey that reminds me of a space odyssey. Though not a grand sci-fi experience, Cosmic Star Heroine should be applauded for what it sets out to do. It even finds time to mix in some references here and there, one in particular stands out to me leaps and bounds. I also must mention the music, which in my eyes, or is in this case, is one of the best I've heard so far in 2022. The final dungeon theme in particular had me hooked. The only real complaints I have for this game lie mostly with the story structure. Its pacing reminded me of... Not exaggerating, it's breakneck speed, which works in detriment to the amount of characters who join you. I can't remember completely, but I think you had a choice of over 10 characters when all was said and done, and as a result, pretty much none of them got any sort of development outside of a text box or two. There were also some technical issues on my end, the PC version crashed once, and there was a notable bug with one of the mainline quests. It appeared that the game skipped over a step without mine realising. But all said and done, it's another great indie title with solid value for money, worth a try if you're looking for something shorter in between your more taxing JRPG adventures. At number 7 is Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age S, or the Definitive Edition if you will. Now, I've talked quite a bit about DQ11 recently, so I'll keep my commentary brief. Yes, it's a fantastic game, but it's further down the list because I had to take a 2-month hiatus from it. It didn't grab me at first. It's that OST, man. I can't stand it. When I returned, I actually had to turn it off and listen to my own music, which was great because that OST was unfortunately overshadowing what was otherwise an amazing game. Chock full of content, charming presentation, a lovable bunch of characters, and a grand adventure. It was all there in DQ11. The amount of time you could sink into this game could easily push you to the 100-hour mark and you'd still have a bunch of stuff to do. I was content with my playthrough of around 65 hours though, I rarely push into the triple digits. Either way, DQ11 needs no further commentary. I'm sure many have already played it and have their own thoughts, and though it took a while to convince me, it eventually did win me over. At number 6 is the remastered Nier Replicant. Now, I've made no secret that I adored Nier Automata. I loved how the story was delivered, especially its presentation of more thought-provoking themes, and naturally the gameplay was top tier as well. So it goes without saying that I wanted to try the original as well following its remaster. And as a fan of Automata, I was equally pleased with Replicant, though for me it's not as good. Despite being a modern upgrade in the words of Square, minus the additional content, this is still a remaster of a game that released over a decade ago, so it's natural that some of the mechanics on offer here haven't aged too well. There's a fair amount of repetition if you want to see the full story, the quests are just bad in terms of what you need to do to complete them, and I was getting the distinct impression that Yoko Taro was trolling the players by forcing them to go back and forth between the same locations at varying points. But even with those issues, Replicant shone in so many other areas. Though I've never been on board with repeated playthroughs, and still am not, its narrative was excellent for my personal taste. It kept me hooked, despite the repetition. The music, well, I could see why it won at the Game Awards, and the characters are some of the best I've journeyed with in recent memory. The interchange and commentary between them was wonderful. When I think of great dialogue in JRPGs, I will immediately point to Replicant, and Grimoire Weiss specifically. Whoever voiced and wrote this character needs a pat on the back. And those quality elements easily kept me hooked through the sections that for all intents were a bit of a slog. Not gonna be for everyone is Nier Replicant, but if you liked Automata and how it was structured, I think you'll get a kick out of this too. At number 5 is Neo, The World Ends With You. Since I played the original, I wasn't letting the sequel slide away to gather dust. No, I played that sucker immediately after finishing the first game. And it immediately got points because it went back to traditional controls. Yeah, so good for them. But in all seriousness, I think Neo is an excellent follow-up to the original. It's immediately familiar as once again you're taking part in the Reaper's game, you've got a modernised Shibuya which utilises that signature art style, the sprite work is fantastic and the story was actually pretty damn good with some really poignant moments and twists. As a person who played the original first, I also think that I did get a better experience because of that, so if you're thinking of trying Neo, at least give thought to trying the original first, though really you can still enjoy this without doing so. OST was brilliant, not as good as the original for me, but still up there as one of the best collections I've heard in recent memory, and the combat was also solid. I do admit it's a bit repetitive as that's how the fights are designed, you're generally encouraged to stack encounters together for more rewards, but it keeps you engaged. Each character can equip a pin just like before and said pins are mapped to a button, so finding combinations that complement each other is a big draw of the game. And there's plenty to find as well. If you've been contemplating it, give this series a go if you get the chance, they're severely underrated as far as I'm concerned and deserve more attention. Number 4 is the final game from Atelier's Mysterious trilogy and Atelier Lydian Seuel, The Alchemists and the Mysterious Paintings. Now, I've already gone into depth on the Mysterious trilogy on a previous video. If you want a full rundown on why those games ruled, then check it out. But TLDR for Lydian Seuel, it takes all of the good from the first two games, omits much of the bad, and then improves on the stuff it carries over. The alchemy system, at least in terms of the original trilogy, is at its best here. It's intuitively designed, addicting, and simple to grasp, but difficult to master. The new characters introduced along with the returning ones are light-hearted and fun, the combat is more slick than the previous two games, utilising a front and back line that works in clear tandem with alchemy, and the world design is varied yet charming owing to the painted worlds themselves. The OST is good as well, but that's pretty much the case with all Atelier games. Lydian Seuel is wonderful, a game you can play after a stressful day and come out smiling after your session is done. Give it a whirl if you get the chance, that DX bundle of the Mysterious trilogy is easily accessible nowadays. Now from cotton candy to unbreakable jawbreaker. Number 3, I promise this is not a placement to win with the betting syndicate, is Shin Megami Tensei 3.
Nocturne.
Outside of Persona 5 and Shin Megami Tensei 4, I don't have much of a background with the Mega 10 games, but I'm slowly working my way through them. And SMT3 was everything I experienced in 4, but ramped up. It's old school, and it's brutal. Nocturne screwed me over more times than I care to mention, but I always came back for more, which speaks to its quality. The immediate positive is the atmosphere. SMT3 delivers a world that is on the precipice of change. It's barren, it's lonely, and it's unsafe. Even your supposed havens aren't clear from random encounters. There's a real need to make sure you're consistently saving your game lest you lose a bunch of progress. I can't tell you how stressed I was in the second Kalpa at times knowing that a bad encounter was all that stood between me and an hour of lost gameplay. But that challenge is part of the experience, building up your team of demons to circumvent any situation. I also really like the different Magatamas you can equip and how they fed into the Demi-Fiend's progression. You can easily make a character that fits your own playstyle and also complements the demons you take on board. Demons in themselves and the customization that comes with them is super addicting and rewarding in equal measure, especially at the higher levels. The only things that I docked this game for, and I realise this is partially a product of its time, is that there's a lot of backtracking if you want the ending I went for, and the random encounter rate is a bit too frequent for my taste, especially in that final dungeon when I'm trying to finish up a puzzle or getting murked by the floor traps. And yes, I did use the rappel. Small gripes though, SMT3 Nocturne is an excellent game and well worth the playthrough if you're in the mood for a challenge. Have you heard about the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV played by millions around the world? Well, you're about to. Number 2 is Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. Yeah, it's not a JRPG in the strictest sense, but it might as well be. The story in Final Fantasy XIV is a joy, one of my favourite long-running narratives, and Endwalker was the perfect way to end this particular arc that begun way back in A Realm Reborn. There's a reason why Endwalker attracted so much fanfare upon its release, why the servers were filled to bursting with players in those first couple of weeks. It's just a wonderful payoff for everything the players have experienced up to that point. The class changes were welcome, as were the new jobs introduced for the expansion, dungeons were engaging, and the likes of Soken once again exceeded themselves with the OST, especially in those final moments. Final Fantasy XIV is special. It's my MMO of choice hands down, not only for how much quality it displays upon the release of each expansion, but also for its brilliant dev team who have the players' interests at heart with every decision. Yeah, sure, they're doing so because it benefits Square's war chest at the end of the day, but you can tell that the likes of Yoshi P and co care about Final Fantasy XIV, and they care equally about the community they have fostered over the years since its revival. And at number 1 for the first quarter of 2022 is Atelier Sophie 2, The Alchemist and the Mysterious Dream. This is the second game I have reviewed before release, as I only reserved that for titles I'm excited for, and Sophie 2 did not disappoint. It was everything I wanted and more. Just like with Liddy and Suel, I've done a review on this, so for a more in-depth look at why I love this game, you can check that out if you want. But Atelier Sophie 2 continues the upward trajectory of this series. No matter what game it is, Gust just have a knack for these types of titles. When you think you've seen it all, they come in with something fresh to the table. The foundation of the original trilogy remains, but the additions allow Sophie 2 to stand apart from its contemporaries while also being just as fun. The presentation is arguably the best it's ever been, the turn-based combat system returns and once again is highly linked to alchemy. Not to mention feeling dynamic with the combinations between characters that actively switches control as well. The weather changing mechanic is inspired in terms of what it does for level design, and the characters are once again brilliant. Tropey, but tropes done right. Atelier Sophie 2 is without doubt my favourite game that I've played so far in 2022, and I imagine it will remain within that bracket by the end of the year as well. And there we go guys, the 11 JRPGs I have played thus far, all ranked out. I hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully it will give you some ideas or insights into the games you're thinking of trying out yourselves. See you next week, and peace.